Probably you know the game. Which door is God behind? Is God behind door number 1? Is God behind door number 2? Is God behind door number 3? Which door is God behind? How many say door number 1? How many say door number 2? How many say door number 3? I don't know which one is right. You would think I would, after all. I've been to seminary, and I've been ordained, and I've been at this for 31 years, and I've been to graduate school. You'd think I would know which door is the door that God is behind, but I don't know whether it's door 1 or door 2 or door 3. You would think Moses would know. Moses is one of the biblical big shots. We've been talking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, and now we're down to Moses, the Old Testament big shots. You would think Moses would know. He's up there in the wilderness now, tending sheep for his father-in-law. That maybe catches you by surprise. If you remember where we met Moses last Sunday, Moses was one of those little babies that was born after Pharaoh had decided that there should be no more male children among these Hebrew immigrant people. They were becoming too strong and too powerful, so Pharaoh had said, no more male babies. If a male baby is born, throw it in the river, let the crocodiles eat it. But of course, it didn't quite work out that way, and one of those little babies that was born, you heard the story last week, was a baby named Moses, whose mother kept him for 3 months or so until it got to be difficult to keep him hidden, and then put him in a little basket that would float in the water, and put the basket in the water and watch the basket float away. And you remember that Pharaoh's daughter and some of her friends were down by the river looking around, swimming, playing, bathing. And Pharaoh's daughter found this little basket with a baby inside and took the baby home, sort of like you would take a puppy home if you found a stray puppy. Moses' sister Miriam was up on the riverbank watching all of this from hiding, and when she saw Pharaoh's daughter pick up this baby who was her brother, she went up to Pharaoh's daughter and said, do you suppose you would want a milk nurse for this baby, somebody to take care of it, nurse him, and so on? And Pharaoh's daughter knew enough about such things to think maybe that's a good idea. So Miriam went home and got Moses' mother, her mother, who got paid for taking care of her own son until he was weaned and able to go and live in the palace. And he'd been living in the palace for quite some time, living as an Egyptian, living as a grandson to the king, living as a daughter to the king's daughter, a son to the king's daughter. So he's kind of a big shot. Except that apparently he never forgot who his own people were. And so one day he is out and about, doing whatever grandsons to the king do when they're out and about, and he noticed an Egyptian taskmaster beating the tar out of one of those Hebrew slaves. It made him mad. And so he went over and he killed the taskmaster, at which point he realized that the Egyptians are going to realize who his real people are too, and so he is no longer safe in Egypt. He makes a run out into the wilderness where he hooks up with his father-in-law and begins tending sheep way out in the desert. Something odd happened while he was out there. Out in the desert, this bush caught fire, and it started to burn, and it started to burn. And the people who study this stuff, I suppose they're telling the truth, say that once in a while this does actually happen, that because of the heat and the dryness and everything is just right, once in a while there would be sort of a spontaneous combustion, and a bush will burn, and you would go look at it because it's kind of an amazing thing. And you might want to be careful that the fire didn't spread beyond the particular little area, but this bush burned and burned and burned and burned and burned and never burned up. And so Moses thought, this really is something I better check out. He went over, and as he was approaching the bush, he heard a voice. Who's speaking? The voice identifies itself, this male-sounding voice. The male-sounding voice says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And here's why I'm speaking to you, Moses. I got a job for you. I got a job for you to do. Moses kind of has to take a breath while he listens to what God wants him to do. You want me to go down and have a little chat with Pharaoh about these Hebrew slaves? Maybe even more difficult, you want me to go to these Hebrew people who have been slaves now for several generations, and you want me to tell them that finally now somebody is going to do something about their slavery? They're going to want to know, since we haven't run into you in quite some time, God. They're going to want to know, who are you? Who sent me? So tell me again, who are you? And God says, I am who I am. That's who I am. Sounds almost like a Dr. Seuss book, doesn't it? I am who I am. I will be what I will be. I will do what I will do. So don't box me in, Moses. I will do whatever the situation requires. And if you string together enough situations, after a while, you begin to figure out who I am. Well, we still don't know much, do we? And Moses didn't even know much. You heard in the reading the promise that when Moses said, give me some kind of a sign. Remember what the sign was in the reading? God said to Moses, well, when this thing is all done, and when you are all out here in the land that I'm going to lead you to, then you will know that I am God. After you've gone through all, so there is no knowing in the middle, apparently. And we, at this point, don't know much. But we do know now which door God is behind. At least this time, God is behind the door that has the picture of a bush on it. The door that has the picture of the bush that burns and burns and burns and burns, but is never burned up. At least for now, God is behind that door. Change scenes now to today's gospel reading. Peter thinks he knows Jesus pretty well. Peter has been following Jesus for more or less 3 years now, along with the other disciples, following Jesus, listening to what Jesus says, watching what Jesus does, having conversations with Jesus about his mission and his purpose and all of that. Peter thinks he knows Jesus pretty well. They've been over a couple of bumps in the road and all of that. He knows Jesus pretty well, he thinks. And then Jesus starts saying all this crazy stuff. Jesus starts talking about going up to Jerusalem to undergo great suffering, going up to Jerusalem where he'll be killed, going up to Jerusalem where on the third day he will be raised from the dead. And Peter says, what door have you been hiding all of this behind? I thought I knew who you were, Jesus. I thought you were Messiah. I thought you were Christ. I thought you were the one sent from God. I thought you were Son of David. I thought you were our new King. And Jesus says to Peter, well, there's more. There's more. Those who wish to be my followers must take up their cross and follow me. Because you see, God will be what God will be, and God will do what God will do. So don't box me in, Peter. I will do what I need to do. And Peter, you need to decide. You need to decide if you are willing to open the door and find me there. So which door is God behind now? The God revealed in Jesus is behind which door? The door that has the cross on it. The cross upon which Jesus will be hung. The cross that Jesus invites you and me to pick up and carry as we follow him. Jesus is behind the door with a cross on it. Now suppose somebody here, somebody now, would like to find God. Suppose that person comes to this congregation and wants to find God. Or maybe comes to you as an individual and wants to find God. Show me, they say to us, show me, they say to you, which door is God behind? Which door should I open? And remember, this is the God who said, I am who I am. This is the God who says, I will be what I will be. I will do what I will do. I will do what the situation requires. So don't try to box me in. Give me some maneuvering room. Cooperate with me a little bit, in fact, he says. Because for me to do this work, you need to be there too. For all of this to work, you need to be behind the door that people open to. Because in seeing you, Jesus says, they will see me. So which doors do people open in order to find God here? In order to find God now? St. Paul put together quite a list in that reading from Romans. St. Paul said, God is behind the door where Christians love one another with genuine affection. You open that door and you see Christians loving one another with a love where they look out for each other and they care for each other. You see Christians loving one another with a love that is full of respect and honor and grace. You look behind that door and you will find God. You look behind the door where Christians are living out their faith with joyful, hopeful, patient persistence. You look behind the door where empathy is a way of life. where people weep with those who weep, where people rejoice with those who rejoice. You look behind the door that refuses to close. It refuses to close because generosity is always tumbling out of it and spilling out of it. Generosity towards sisters and brothers in Christ. Generosity towards strangers who need a home. Generosity even toward our enemies. You look behind the door where Christians bless even those who persecute them. You look behind the door where revenge is never our response, where living peaceably with all is the goal, insofar as it is ours to accomplish. You look behind the door where evil is overcome by good. Because for God to do what God does, those are what the situation requires. The God behind the burning bush calls us to embrace the vocation of helping people see God. The God behind the door with a cross on it calls us to take up our cross upon which life is surrendered so that life may be found. Because behind all of these doors is the God whose Spirit flows free, high, and surging where it will. Behind all these doors is the God who was and who is and who always will be, that same unbounded one who will do what must be done to rescue us from slavery, to free us from captivity, to turn us into instruments of peace. Because behind all of those doors is the God who is life, the God who gives life, the God who makes us alive, the God of Abraham and Sarah, the God of Isaac and Rebekah, the God of Jacob and Rachel, the God of Joseph and his brothers, the God of Moses and Miriam, your God and my God, the God whose name we praise this morning.